Good afternoon, everybody. Well, today was supposed to be the initial release of the updated forms. Well, guess what? The DOJ wants to look at our forms again and review it one more time. So basically, the release of the forms have been postponed until uncertain date, right? Um, Maybe the August 15th or 16th is the date that they're gonna give it back to us. But right now, the DOJ is now reviewing the paperwork and to see if they have any more questions or anything that they want us to add. Okay, so for now, all the old forms are still valid, right? If and when the new forms come up and they become, they update them and they revise them and they release it, most likely for whatever forms that you have now are still going to continue. The BRBC might need to be adjusted or maybe in an addendum. But as far as the purchase agreement, that will continue based on the terms that you have now. You don't need to do anything when the new forms comes out. The listing agreement, there might be some slight amendments you may have to do, but that's going to depend on what the DOJ says. And then, of course, the BRBC, you'll probably have to do some amendments on that when the new forms comes out. Okay, but for now, I'm assuming you guys know the current BRBC form, right? And then you know the current listing agreement, and of course the current purchase contract. So I'm going to quickly review some of those changes that's coming on these forms as of we know it today. All right. So one of the first forms that I'm going to talk about, and we talked about this last week in numerous Zoom meetings, right? So on your screen, you guys should be able to see, the purchase agreement, right? As you can see here, this is revised 624. That may change, but for now, that's what we have. So on the purchase agreement, not much has changed, right? The biggest change are two things, okay? So let's cover those a little bit. Okay, on the first page, not much, right? Nothing here, okay? If you look at on the second page, right? Item 3G3, right? This is technically item 3, and then G3, right? Where it says here, and then you look at paragraph 18 that explains our compensation as a broker, right? We got to make sure starting August 16th that we always check this box. This might become, well, no, it's still going to be probably a checkbox. I don't think they're going to make it um, an automatic checkbox, but I think it's going to be something that you're still going to need to make sure you check. So when we create our new templates, updated templates at a later time, once the forms are released, I'm going to teach you guys to always check this box as part of your template. Okay, so G3, 3G3 technically. Okay, and in there, make sure you understand the SPBB form, the seller to pay buyer broker compensation, right? So make sure you download that form. That's nothing new. That's gonna, there's gonna be some amendments to it or some changes, but make sure you know the SPBB form. Okay. Now this is assuming that you have the BRBC form. Right now, you're not required to provide the BRBC form to the buyers, to the listing agent or the board of realtors. Okay. If they ask for it, you have to provide it to prove what commission you were supposed to charge the buyer. Okay. Remember, whatever you have on your BRBC form is what you will be paid maximum by the buyer and or seller. Okay. Remember, part of the BRBC, any compensation from a third party will be deducted on what's on the BRBC, and then the buyer will pay the difference or you will waive that difference, right? If the seller's offering 3% and you on the BRBC put 2.5%, guess what? You just saved the seller a 0.5%. Okay. So as I've been teaching you guys before, you should always put 3% of the purchase price on the BRBC form. And we'll talk about where to put that. Okay. So make sure you guys know three on page 2, item G3, which is technically, part of item 3 of the contract. Now, the biggest change that you're probably going to see here is, if you look on the bottom, okay, is regarding insurance. As you know, insurance in California and throughout the US is becoming more expensive, or in California, they're not even writing new policies, right? So this L4 is now a separate contingency called out. Remember, I've always told you guys there's always 5 main contingencies: loan contingency, appraisal contingency, investigation/inspection contingency, and then the seller disclosure contingency. And I told you guys insurability is a contingency, which was part of the investigation part. Now it's a totally separate thing to where it's now in the face of the buyers. okay, that you can probably remove all contingencies except for the insurance contingency, because that contingency says that it's subject to the buyer getting insurance, number one, knowing how much it is and finding out what it is. It's not an insurance quote. Remember, the key word is the insurance binder policy, right? Whenever your client is looking for insurance, ask for the insurance binder policy, where they actually write the contract. The insurance company underwrites it, looks at the different zones, right? Earthquake zone, flood zone, and of course the wildfire zones. They need to check that to see how much to charge the buyer and to see if it's even available or if the insurance company is writing. Okay, like Allstate, supposedly they stopped. Farmers, I know, still writing, subject to where the property is. Okay, as you can see, there are some other red stuff here. It's more for explanations, so please read that as you can. So again, for the RPA, just remember the insurance part, and of course on the top, start checking the box on G3, okay, item 3G3, which is up here, okay? And then make sure you guys know how to read the SPBB form, all right? So if you guys have questions, put it on the chat. I'll answer it after the presentation, okay? So the next form that I want to cover is the listing agreement, right? So here is the listing agreement, right? Guess how it looks now. It's now the grid system, right? Just like the RPA, right? So again, it's supposed to be updated this month. The main thing that the changes that's been here is regarding the commissions, right? So if you look at the top, right, it's pretty simple, right? Pretty straightforward. The listing period and all that, right? It's all here. So now on item 2, which is the biggest thing, item 2 is the whole grid system. This is where you're gonna need to complete stuff. You're gonna need to put timelines. You're gonna need to put your commissions and things like that. So on item 2A, right, beginning and end date, pretty simple. List price, specific things, right? Is it a now this is supposed to be for a residential, but if it's a manufacturer on probate, there are forms that you need. It used to be on the second page, now it's on the front page. Okay, so everything's on the front page now. Now C, very biggest thing that you need to understand is compensation, right? So on C, right? C1, 2, and 3, and 4 are now separated. This used to be all in one. So there's 4 commissions that you need to talk to your clients about. Number 1, compensation as a listing agent to the seller broker. What is that? Number 2, if checked, right? Is the seller willing to offer any commissions to the buyer agent now at the time of listing? They can always do it later, depending on the offer, but right now you can put there 2.5%, 3% based on the sales price. So the way I will teach you, you should always have a number here and a number there already when you take the listing. Now, if it means not taking the listing because the seller doesn't want to offer anything, that's a business decision that you have to make. Me personally, I will not take a listing unless they want to offer something already. Okay. And I will explain to them why that would be. Of course, it's their option not to pay it, right? If they say, I don't want to pay it, then I have to make a business decision. Do I want to take that listing or not? Understanding that I will probably have to have this conversation again later when we get the offer. So think about that, right? Would you take a listing if the seller is not willing to pay anything, or they're willing to pay, like, say, 1%, right? Based on the sales price. Think about that. Okay. So we'll address any concerns later on. The third number here is the compensation if a buyer is unrepresented. Let's say a buyer comes to your open house and say, I want to make an offer, but I don't have an agent and I don't want you to be my agent. Is the seller willing to, number 1, entertain the offer of an unrepresented buyer? Number 2, are they willing to pay you to help the buyer write that offer? Not represent, but write the offer. Okay, so we'll discuss that further. Number 4, C4, talks about what if you double end it? How much are you going to get paid? Basically C1 and C2. Will you double end it, 3%, 3%? Or are you going to give them a break? Like, if I double end it, it's only going to be 3% and 2% as a buyer agent. Figure that out, right? So now you have to spell that out, okay? But usually it's a combination of 4A and B, unless you're going to give them a break. Remember dual variable commission? This is where it is now, okay? Now, that's if you're representing the same, as it says here, same individual agent, not same company, same individual agent, right? because technically dual agency, if Ann Gupta sell is the listing agent, I'm the buyer agent, that's dual agency. So that's only A and B, right? But if Ann does an open house on her listing, a buyer comes in, no agent, but wants Ann to represent the buyer, then that's where C4 comes in. If a buyer says, nope, I don't have an agent, I don't want you to represent me, but I want you just write an offer, then that's where C3 comes in as a buyer. So 4B or C2, 3, and 4 talks about the buyer agent commission, okay? Or representing or helping the buyer out. Okay, so please make sure you understand what what C2, 3, go to the paragraph 4A, right? All paragraph 4s, right? That explains all of these things, right? So make sure you guys understand how letter C talks about compensation, okay? Now, letter D, right? Now, it says here optional seller concessions, right? This is as buyer credit. This has nothing to do with commissions, okay? This is like a buyer credit towards closing costs to lower the points, things like that. So this is totally something new. This used to be in the others line, right? We used to add this, but at this point, it's now an option for the seller if they want to pay anything. Again, this is not to be used to pay the buyer broker, okay? That's what C2 is, okay? Right, so C talks about compensation. D is only seller concessions to the buyer. And then, of course, on letter E, these are where we talk about the personal items included, excluded, right, of the contract. So again, you can either put things here or just leave it blank, right? So for now, I always probably just leave this blank unless the seller says, "Oh, I'm going to leave the washer, dryer, refrigerator, and things like that." So you would put it in here. So please make sure you understand all of page 1, more specifically, letter C, right? That talks about compensation. And then go to paragraph 4 to see what those actually mean, okay? So if I go to now to the next page, okay? These is, again, they made everything into a grid system. So on F, right? On your Moxie Hub, Will did a class together with Alex last week, right? This Thursday, they're gonna look at the changes on the RPA. On the email I've been sending you guys, right, the recordings, there's 3 training videos in there from CAR, okay? Number 1, he talks about the BRBC. The second one talks about the listing agreement, which we're talking about today. And then the third one talks about the RPA and some changes to the other forms, okay? So please make sure you guys watch those 3 training videos or webinars from CAR, okay? So just look for my email that I sent this morning around 8 o'clock or so. If not, it was sent last week also, right? So this talks about when will the property be marketed, coming soon, public marketing, right? So it's pretty straightforward. Please read it. So make sure you understand it. And then when are offers, right? These were all in the contracts before on the current listing agreement. It's just now in a grid system. It's just in a, to me, it's easier to find, okay? So now it's on the first 2 pages, okay? So please read that, right? What it is, right? Remember here, lockbox signs, does the seller want it? Things like that, right? They have to check. Now, it's automatic that they're allowing us to put a key safe. This is opt out. So if they don't want a lockbox, they don't want to sign, they need to check this box, right? Because it's automatically that we're going to put it on the we're going to put it on the MLS. We're going to, put their pictures. We're going to put a lockbox. We're going to put a sign, right? That's part of our marketing. If they want to say no to any of those, then that's where it says here on H, right? Seller instructs broker not to use photographs in marketing, except as required for MLS rules. What does MLS rule says? You got to have a picture of the front of the house. That's it. No other pictures, right? In this case, now the seller has the right to say, I don't want any pictures, right? Except for what's required by MLS rules, which is right now, it's still just one picture of the house in the front, current photo, right? Nothing else. You don't need to have a picture of the bathroom, right? Or the kitchen, right? MLS rule says it's just a one picture of the front of the house, okay? So, I don't know how many of you guys have ever taken a listing where the seller says don't take any pictures. I've had many requests, right? But I tell them, why it's not advisable for them not to, take pictures. Okay. So again, it's up to you, right? If you've ever taken a listing without photos, okay. Now, can you take photos of the neighborhood or common areas, yeah. So you don't necessarily need to have pictures of inside the house, because why? Some people are very private. Some people, if you're a thief, right? That's one way for you to start shopping for the next house you're going to break into, by looking at for sale listings, figuring out which one's vacant, and figure out who has nice staging, right? That's what some burglars do. They look at the listings on all these websites, and guess what? They case out the house, and they break in and take stuff, right? So that's how that works. Okay, and the rest of this is just explanations. Okay, so I'm going to leave it up to you guys to read this. On the webinar from CAR, they do actually talk about these. Okay, all right. Item 4, all right, very important. You need to understand, how do you earn your money? Okay, so make sure you read item 4. Okay, the rest of this is just explanations. Okay, so I'm going to leave it up to you guys, as I said, to read all of this in its entirety. Right now, this is not live yet. This is still a draft. The DOJ is still reviewing it, making sure there's, if they have anything we need to change. Okay, so make sure you guys read it, highlight it, and then ask questions. Okay, so all right, so that's what the listing agreement looks like. Please review it. The third form that we're going to look at today is the actual BRBC form, right? The buyer representation, broker compensation, right? BRBC. Okay, expand. All right, so let's look at this, right? Pretty straightforward, right? Again, it's in the grid system. It makes everything easy to find, right? Okay, so here, everything on the buyer reps, most important, is all on the front page, right? Um, the RPA is the first 3 pages. The listing is the first 2 pages. The BRBC, the first page. Okay. Now, the other pages of the forms are very important also, yet completing it is limited just pretty much on the first page. So let's look at this, right? So the top part's pretty easy, right? The buyer name and the broker, right? Again, if husband and wife are going to hire you, you need both their names, both their signatures. Even though you're just meeting with the buyers, or one of the spouses, you need to have both names and both signatures. Otherwise, it's technically not valid, because you only got one signature, okay, or one name. So always ask whose name will be on title. How do you want your name to appear in title? That kind of will clarify things. All right. Terms of representation. This is pretty straightforward. A1, right? Beginning and end. Just like any real estate contract, you need to have a beginning and end, right? You can't have, a blank date. Okay? There has to be a beginning and an end. And nowadays it's dates. Right now, the law is going to be 90 days maximum. So if it's more than 90 days, the form is cancelable or void, because you broke the rules or the law. Okay. The BRBC now is limited to just 90 days. Okay. You can renew it, but it's only 90 days. So make sure you count 90 days. Okay. Type of representation, it's automatically non-exclusive. Okay. As you can see here, it's non-exclusive. Or is it exclusive? Okay. A buyer can have multiple non-exclusive agreements in the same area. A buyer can have multiple exclusive agreements if they're in different areas or different types of properties. Okay, so please make sure you guys understand that. All right, B, okay? Property to be acquired. Pretty straightforward. What type of property? Remember before I told you guys, you can't just put any house in California, right? It has to be a single family, including condos. So basically 1 unit, or it's going to be a multi-unit, right? So again, pretty straightforward, right? Location. It says here counties or cities, right? So you can't just, and it says counties, right? You can't say any county in the Bay Area or Northern California, right? You got to be county specific and city specific if possible. Okay. All right. Additional description. This is where before I told you guys, make sure you put like 3 to 5 bedrooms, right? Something like that. Again, you can't just say any house. Okay. So 3 to 5 bedrooms, 1,600 to 2,500 square foot, right? Swimming pool, whatever you think they really want, right? I probably won't put swimming pool, but 3 bedrooms, number of bathrooms, at least a range, right? Like 1 to 3 baths, right? Something like that. And then additional description. Again, if this is going to be a non-exclusive or exclusive, you have to be sometimes more specific. Let's say if they want to hire you to find a a condo in this specific complex only, right? And they want to hire Henry for a different complex because he's a specialist for that complex, and John for another one, right? So again, he can have, like I said, non-exclusive. It could be for the same area, same types of properties. Non An exclusive has to be different properties, okay, or different areas. Okay, or B, the following specified properties only, right? So if this is like your listing, you know, in the future, right? Don't show a house to a buyer unless you know they already have an agent. And if you've spoken to the agent, right, and you tell them, hey, have your agent show it. Or if I would always ask, if you like the house, my listing, would I be the one to write the offer? I always ask that question. Even if they say they have an agent or not agent, I always ask who's going to write the offer. And if they just say, well, if I like it, I'll let you write it. Well, great. Let me send you, a buyer representation form that basically spells out when I show you the house and you like it, I will be your agent. Right? That's what we call procuring cause before, right? And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So again, make sure that the buyer understands, are they represented or not? And if they are represented, who do they want to represent? Me or do they have somebody else? Okay? Again, if somebody has an exclusive agreement, right, I cannot double up on that. Okay, meaning if they've hired Maria for Fremont already, three to five bedrooms, right? That buyer cannot hire me for the same type of property if she already has an exclusive agreement. If that was a non-exclusive, like, hey, first person to find me the right house, non-exclusive, then I can solicit that buyer for that same specific property. Are we clear? Okay. Exclusive, hands off. Non-exclusive, go after them if you want. Okay. The next B5 now talks about if you've shown them many properties and they either want to cancel or the BRBC has expired, it's past the 90 days. You can give them a list of properties you've shown them, and basically you were the procuring cause. You've done some work. Now you give them that list, and then you tell the buyer, hey, if you buy any of these, make sure you let me know and the listing agent know that you're represented by me, or I will have to be representing you. Okay, so that should be pretty clear. Make sure you understand B1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? 6 is basically excluded. Again, this is if they've already seen some other properties with other agents already, they can have that list, right? Additional buyer preferences, this is a new line, right? But basically it talks more about, um, what type of property they're buying. So make sure you guys download this new form that's coming. It's called the BIP. Okay. We'll talk about that when it comes out, but it's on the list of forms that's to be revised and released. Okay, compensation, very important. Letter D. This is probably the most important thing that you guys have to make sure you understand. Agent compensation, 3%. I tell you guys to put 3%. Okay, unless you know the seller's paying more. Okay, how do you know? You call the agent, right? But typically 3 is the max you probably get paid in this market. Okay, so I will put 3%. Payments from third parties. Well, basically, if you collect any money from any third party, that will be deducted to this amount. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? So if you check G3 on the contract, right, on page 2, you collect money there. That's to be deducted from this amount, right? D3, right? Again, this just talks about, this is your safety clause, right? So how many days do you put? 90 days or less if you want, but no more than 90 days. Okay. So this will be 90 days or less. Okay. Cancellation notice, right? Again, if it's non-exclusive, it can be canceled anytime. If it's exclusive, 30 days after receipt. It's automatic, right? So again, it's up to you if you want to extend it upon receipt. You can put here however many days you want, right? So if it's non-exclusive, you may want to put, at least 7 days, 3 to 7 days, right? Or you just want to say, hey, if you don't want to work with me, fine, get out of here, right? It's up to you. Okay. So buyer financial information, basically, that they're going to give you this information, things like that, right? So now it's free to share, okay? In other terms. So, all right. So that's the first page. That's probably the most important part of this BRBC form. There are some other things here that you need to make sure you read, right? Is compensation to broker. Understand what broker involvement means, right? So I'm going to leave it up to you guys to read it. It's discussed on the CAR webinar. Make sure you watch those 3 training videos, okay? Understand what broker involvement is, okay? Because this is important when it comes to getting paid. Because if all you've been doing is sending them Real Scout listing alerts, you haven't earned your money yet, okay? So you have to do more than listing alerts to earn the money, okay? After that, everything else is pretty much explanations. Please make sure you understand it and you know how you're going to get paid. Okay, so make sure you read that. Nothing else really. I know there's a lot of red stuff in here. All that means is that it's either that they changed the verbiage a little bit, or at the very most, they just moved it around. Okay, so make sure you guys read it. What happens to the buyer's financial and personal information? Who can you share that information to? Please make sure you read it. Okay. Again, read this form as if you are the buyer. Okay. Other than that, it's pretty much straightforward. I'm going to leave it up to you guys, like I said, to read it and then come back with your questions. Okay. So tomorrow, we have the 12 p.m. Market pulse. So we're going to talk more about a little bit about some more Q&A towards the end. Again, please make sure you guys watch those training videos and then jump on Zoom. Probably, I'm not sure if I'm going to do one tomorrow at 2 or Wednesday. Most likely it's going to be Wednesday at 2. I don't know. But again, if you have questions, guys, please reach out before any of the classes. Make sure you read it, watch the training videos. There's 3 videos in my email, and then you have now 2 on Moxie, that is done by the corporate offices with Will and Alex. There'll be a 3rd video coming up with them when they talk about the RPA this coming Thursday, okay, before our Mike Ferry event. So we can listen to that on our phones if needed. Okay, so any questions on the contracts? Let me stop my share and let me see if there's any questions on the chat. The chat is blank. There's no questions on the chat. So I'm gonna leave it up to you guys to make it open. Any questions about number 1, the listing agreement, the RPA, and of course the BRBC form. Okay. Again, just note the changes. I discussed what the updates are. I'll do a final summary at the very end before we wrap up. So right now, let's do some Q&A. Any questions on the forms itself? Anything? As you know, the form release has been extended to an uncertain date. Could be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, right? I say before August 15th is when they're probably going to release it. So make sure review it now. You're still going to be using the old forms, the old BRBC, the old listing agreement, the current, RPA, right? Everything is normal before. Nothing has changed. Continue to use the forms that you have now, okay? Because they have not released the updated and revised forms. So, any questions? John, Maria, Henry, Syed, Blanche, Bonita? Anything whatsoever? We're good? All right.
I have one question, Craig.
Yes, John.
It's not in the form, but just more
Sure.
It's not in the form, more on
Okay, you can ask it.
Submitting an offer. Because what happens this weekend? The buyer hasn't made a decision yet.
Yes.
It's already happening. The seller just put like $10,000 as a commission, right? And I call the agent and say, "Hey, can you please confirm is this $10,000?" So yeah, you can ask on submitting the offer. So what do you ask for?
All right. Well, how much do you want to ask for, or is that what you're asking? Or
No, where do you put
okay.
the asking
All right. So remember?
the
Okay. Let's go back. All right. Let's go back and look at the RPA, right?
Yeah.
The RPA, remember page 2, item 3G3, right? So G3 on page 2. Okay, look at G3. It's technically part of paragraph 3. G3, seller agrees to pay obligation of buyer to compensate buyer's broker. under a separate agreement. So basically, if you better make sure you have a BRBC form where you're asking for what 2.5%, 3%. Let's say that's the number, right? Let's say it's 3%. Well, you can now fill out this form SPBB. So check this box, John. Okay, and then download this form SPBB, and that's where you're going to put the percentage that you want from the seller.
Okay.
Your buyer needs to sign it together with the offer, and that's what you're submitting.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
And again, you tell the buyer this is confirming our fee, right? Because they're going to ask you, what's this form? This is confirming our fee, so that way you don't have to pay us. It's built into the sales price, Mr. Buyer. Are you clear about that? That our fee is going to be paid by the seller through the sales price. Any questions? Fine, right? So that's what that is. So make sure you download the SPB form and check this box. Okay? So good question.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, guys. So make sure you start to use this. Okay. This is very important because eventually you're not going to have, you may not be able to get a call from the listing agent saying what the commission is. In this case, John got the answer, 10,000, and he wants 3%. Then he needs to check this box, download SPB, and then check the proper box on that form that says, that he has an agreement with the buyer and that it's going to be 3%. Okay. And if asked by the listing agent and seller later, he needs to be able to provide that. The MLS might be, I'm not sure if the MLS is going to require that to be part of the forms that we upload, but at this point, it's just only if asked, okay, that you need to provide it. But make sure you have one because, it'll be bad if you didn't have one and you're just making it up, okay? All right, so that's what that is. So make sure you guys know G3. And then, of course, make sure you know the BRBC form.
Hey, Greg.
Yes, Sayed.
So in this case, let's see, the seller agent's paying $10,000.
Yes.
But the property is assuming it's $1 million and it's 3%, and it's going to be $30,000, right?
Hmm?
So the $20,000, there's a form we put in where we put in the $20,000. The buyer's going to pay for it, or how we going to get
okay. So when you write the offer, number one, you're going to ask the seller to pay it, right?
Right.
So you put 3% of the purchase price on that form, right? So let's do this, right? Let's download the form, right? So that way you guys see it. So just in case you guys have not seen the form yet, let me get the SPB form, okay?
Thank you, Greg.
So on the SPB, right? You're welcome. On the SPBB, you have to make sure you ask for the commission that you expect, right? So in this case, seller's paying 10 and you want 3. So what do you put? You ask for 3%, right? You're not asking for an additional 20. You're asking for the full 3%. Okay. So, okay.
So in this case, the buyer has to agree to pay the 3%, or we already signed that. We already signed that.
Remember, the buyer agreed to pay you 3%.
Right.
When they hired you, right?
Right.
When they hired you, not now. When they hired you. So that's why it's important before you work with a buyer that the SPBB form is completed, right? That's the law. It's going to be the law. Okay? It's the law. Okay. It's going to be the law. Okay. So it's not a rule, it's law. Okay.
Right. I understand that.
So, all right. So on this SPBB form, right, this is just confirming that you're asking the seller to pay for it. Okay. So if you look at the form now, right, remember you got your SPBB says, I want 3%. You're going to pay me 3%. Right. So on the SPB, you guys see this, right? Yes.
No.
No, you don't see SPB? Okay. Let me, okay. All right. So let me show you. Now you guys see seller payment to buyer broker?
Yeah.
All right. So this is the SPBB, right? So you check that box on G3 on page 2 of the contract. Right. Now you get this form. Now this will be complete. The top part will be completed. When was the contract written, right? Things like that, right? See this? Buyer and a buyer agent have already entered into a buyer representation agreement. You've already done it, right?
No.
Okay. You're not going to. You've already done it. Okay. So if you read this, I'll leave it up to you guys to read. Okay. So number 1, buyer representation agreement with compensation. Buyer has entered into a written agreement with, to compensate buyer broker 3%, right? For the purchase. So you complete this, okay? You complete three. Number one, 3%.
Right.
Compensation from seller's broker to buyer's broker, okay? Okay. So as of date of this seller payment, right? Buyer's broker documents pursuant to the MLS, right? So this is where you're going to ask seller's broker has agreed to pay buyer's broker what? X amount, right? 3%.
Right.
That's what you're going to put. Okay. Now, if you agree to the 10,000, then you put 10,000. Okay. All right. So it's one of the two. Okay. So after that, okay, seller payment to buyer's broker, okay, shall not be greater than. So this is that extra money, right? So make sure you read, 1, 2, and 3, but typically it's going to be number 1, right? So make sure you understand that, okay? So please complete this form. Make sure you understand it. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, we'll leave it up to you guys to just read it and answer it.
So how this is gonna be paid though? So the $10,000 is on escrow, it's gonna be paid to the agent. And then the remaining is gonna be by the buyers, gonna be paid through the agent. So how this is gonna work to the escrow?
As far as escrow is concerned, okay, remember there are 3 ways it's going to get paid. Number 1, right? Is it going to be paid by the seller, right?
Mhm.
I don't know. What does the contract say, right? In the normal case, yes, it's paid by the seller. Okay?
Right, that's normal, right? But this is $10,000 the seller's
Yeah,
paying.
correct. Okay, all right.
Right.
Okay. Remember, when the seller puts 10,000 on the MLS, right? He hasn't paid that, right? He hasn't paid that, right? He doesn't pay it yet.
Right.
When he accepts the offer, what does the offer say? The offer is going to say, I want 3%, Mr. Seller, paid by you, right? Through the SPBB form and by checking that box. So how much is the seller going to pay? 3%.
3%.
Not 10,000 plus 20, 3%. Okay? The 10,000 goes away. Are we clear, Sam?
No, we're clear, but let's assume that they're saying is no, we're not gonna pay 3%, we're gonna pay the $10,000, that's all we
Okay.
pay.
So now they're going to need to counter you.
Right,
And they're going to send a counter that says seller to only pay 10,000,
right,
right?
and we
Okay.
agreed on that, we agreed on that.
Let's follow this, right?
Yeah.
So now if the seller is only, and after the contract, I don't care if you gave me 2 million, I'm only going to pay you $10,000, right?
Right,
Okay. As a buyer agent, as a listing agent, you guys should be able to negotiate a full commission with the seller. But let's say the seller says I'm only going to pay 10,000, take it or leave it. So now the seller's not going to pay it, but you're going to get the 10,000. So now you're short the extra 20,000 technically, right?
right,
So now you have the option of 2 options. Number 1, the buyer pays it through their own pocket in escrow as part of their closing costs. Some banks may eventually finance it. I don't think so. Or number 3, you will waive it, right? It's negotiable after the seller comes back. Because now, before you have your buyer accept the offer or the counter offer, you need to explain to them that they have to pay you the extra 20,000 because the seller wasn't willing to pay the extra 20,000 or whatever that shortage is. You need to explain that back to your buyer because right now you're not in contract. You're in the counter offer stage,
Right.
which includes your commission, right?
right,
clear?
right, I understand that part, what I'm saying is how it's gonna be, let's assume it's a $10,000, seller pays $20,000, the buyer's gonna pay, how it's gonna be in the end, be paid to the agent. This is gonna be from 2 different sources gonna be paid. Before was 1 sources, before was just the seller was paying, right? Now is the 2 sources paying, is the buyer's paying it, the seller is paying it. How it's gonna be paid,
When we get a check from escrow,
right,
we get 1 check, $30,000,
okay,
right? Because it's just a line item. It's all accounting. All of these is about accounting, about people knowing who's getting paid and what, right? And from a company standpoint, they don't know your splits and all that, but they know that the gross commission is X% based on the BRBC minus what the seller is willing to pay. That's all it is.
Okay, because
again-
what I heard is before was like, when the seller's paying this like $10,000 or $15,000, they pay to the buyer, and the buyers then transfer the money to pay for
Okay,
the compensation.
That's all
That's not-
accounting.
Okay,
That's all accounting.
okay, just wanted to
That's
make
all
sure.
accounting.
Thanks.
It's kind of like,
Well-
Syed, who pays for dinner between you and your wife? Doesn't
From one
matter.
pocket to
It's
the
the
other
same
pocket,
pot.
yeah.
It's the same pot, right? You know,
Yeah.
when the when the wait staff, gives a check to me, my wife doesn't like it. Like, why do they always give you the check? And it's the same pot. Again, this is all accounting. Okay, guys.
Yeah. Okay,
Well,
so
so another
So don't get
option, Greg,
confused,
will be
right? Sorry, John.
Greg. So another option, I would say another solution will be, well, not a solution, just to walk away, because let's say the buyer doesn't want to pay it, and then seller doesn't want to pay,
Mhm.
then there's no deal, right?
Correct. If you guys look at the BRBC form, okay, there's options for the buyer. Mr. Buyer, do you only want me to show you properties that will pay me my full fee? Do you want me to show you all the properties, no matter how much they're offering? You look at the BRBC form, it's pretty clear. The buyer can choose, only show me listings where they're going to offer the full fee. To me, that's not good. If, as a buyer agent, I cannot negotiate my fee to the seller based on the sales price, I'm not doing a good enough job. Because remember, the seller only cares about what? Net amount, right? So if I give him a high enough offer, I should be able to get paid, right? And that's where, to me, some agents are not strong enough regarding their commissions, both as a listing agent, as a buyer agent. Now, I did a deal earlier this year. I dropped my commission from 2.5 to 2.25. Why? To make the deal happen, so I don't get another multiple counter. That was the thing that got me the deal. Was I decided to just drop my commission, by $5,000, move on, because they were going to counter me 10 grand. I said, hey, why don't I do this? What if I do this? And can you get your seller to just accept the offer? And he's getting 5,000 more instead of the 10,000 more. I told him, let's wrap this up tonight. So the listing agent did it and make a phone call. 10 minutes later, we got a deal, right? So again, the commission is not part of the negotiations unless I choose to make it so, right? So bottom line, guys, the commissions are always negotiable, has always been negotiable. It's, as a listing agent, it's up to you if you want to reduce your commission. As a buyer agent, same thing, okay? Just understand, there is now a place where as a buyer agent, I can ask for the commission, whatever that number is. And as a listing agent, it's got about transparency, letting the seller know exactly where all the money is or where the money is going. And bottom line, guys, this is all accounting. In California, commissions have always been negotiable. It's always been clear what we offer on the MLS. It's always been clear how much we're going to get paid, no matter who's representing the buyer. As you can see, most of the lawsuits, if not all of them, are outside California, because there are many states out there where, like we said before, sub-agencies is common, which some of you guys don't need to know about it. And then where commissions are, are hidden, right? Or some agents are saying, our commissions are not negotiable because this is the industry standard. There's no such thing as industry standard. There is what we call, this is what my office requires. Because as a brokerage, we can set our fees flat, right? We don't have to, but the moment you say, everybody's paying this, so you have to offer it, that's what we call antitrust, right? When you make what other people are doing, or you're colluding with other agent or with other brokerages, that's where the issues comes in. At this point, as a brokerage, you can set your fee. A lot of the issues are from other states, okay? But be careful. Just because there's no lawsuits here about this doesn't mean it's not coming. So make sure you guys understand how the forms are used or to be used, and that you know how to complete it to make sure you get paid properly, whatever you deserve. All right. So any questions before we wrap up? We're good. So I'm going to send this link a little bit later together with the other training videos. Bottom line, guys, this is pretty simple. The forms are in grid system, so it's easy to find. Please download the forms, practice it, read it. watch the training videos, get familiar. It's coming, but it's not coming this week, probably. Definitely it's not coming today or tomorrow. So just make sure you guys get ready for it. Keep using the old forms. Right? It's valid no matter what happens in the future. We just have to make some addendums. Okay. So questions, comments, Syed?
No, thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. John,
As
Maria,
always.
Blanche, Bonita. Any thoughts, comments? Okay, so I'm gonna
Thank you.